Welcome to the Blockchain Startup Show with Harrison Wright, a podcast dedicated to dauntless blockchain leaders building our new decentralized future. You'll hear stories, successes, trials, and tribulations as we channel into the lives of high-performing leaders in crypto and Web3. Whether you're currently a Web3 founder or leader, or you one day aspire to be, you'll gain crucial knowledge and insights to accelerate your learning curve, handle this industry's greatest challenges, and make the impact you've always dreamed of.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Blockchain Startup Show. This is your host, Harrison Wright. I'm very excited to welcome our guest today, Maude Bannwart, who is currently COO of Alephium. Alephium, I think, has been flying under the radar somewhat, but I expect that will not be the case for very much longer. Maude, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much for having me. Super excited to be here.
Yeah, excited to have you here as well. I'm curious if you could, we'll get into the meaty stuff, of course, but could you tell us just a little bit of potted history on you, your background with Alephium, and how you got to where you are now?
Of course. So I will start chronologically, if that's possible. I started by successfully failing at my studies. I studied chemical engineering at EPFL, which is an engineering school here in Switzerland. Realized I hated chemistry, went into business, didn't like it either. And from this, I started working into startups, technical startups. And this is relevant because the first job I have was in a company called Best Mile, which was one of Switzerland's most successful startup at a time, which was working in self-driving cars. And this is where I have met actually the founder of Alephium and a number of my colleagues that are now also working with me at Alephium. After this work experience, my next work experience was in a Swiss crypto exchange. And this is kind of how I started into the crypto space. It's an exchange called Like. And really at Like, I had like my baptism of fire into crypto because I joined in December 2017. And if anyone was in crypto around that time, you know that it's the first time Bitcoin hit 20,000. This is the first time the scalability issue started to really be felt. Specifically on Ethereum, because you had the crypto kitties around. And for me, as an experience, as a professional, Like was really the opportunity where I got to do things I never thought I could do so early into my career. So I worked a lot. I built an HR department. I helped around the legal aspect, investor relationship. I also did product management. So I really had kind of a Swiss knife role, I would say, within the company. And it really taught me a lot of what I then was able to leverage for Alephium, because I joined Alephium in June 2021. Alephium at the time was only, the mainnet wasn't there. Just maybe I should quickly mention Alephium is a layer 1 blockchain network. So I joined Alephium in June 2021. At the time, there were only 3 developers in the company, actually 2 internal, 1 part-time. So I was the first non-developer addition to the team. And as such, I kind of oversaw, and still do today, everything that is not development related at Alephium.
You're definitely getting the baptism by fire. You know, there's a million different things to do. Never just one job.
Yeah, but this is what keeps it interesting. I feel like I'm rarely doing twice the same thing. I'm always learning something new. So for me, this is what I find really rewarding.
Definitely. You know, one of the reasons I was really keen to have you on the show is to really get an insight into that process of building an ecosystem from scratch. You know, it's not like building a D app where you have, you know, I think you talk to people that deal in partnerships. Hey, there's an obvious place to go to get these partnerships, but that's not necessarily the case when you're building something like Alephium. But before we get too deep into that, I'm curious what the process of building Alephium's been like so far.
Yeah, I mean, I do want to say that, let's say from a technical standpoint, I haven't built nothing into Alephium. I've made a few PRs, but more like, you know, updates on the website. I will talk a little bit. I think it started really for the founder, Cheng, who is the technical mind behind Alephium. It really started with discontentment with certain direction that the majority that the majority of the industry was taking, and a want to offer a better alternative. It then started obviously by writing white papers, because that was and still is, I think, the first step, because he really focused on technical innovation. So he wrote white paper on on the two key innovation of Alephium. And then he actually started first by pitching them to other network, but quickly realized, I mean, if you're in the space, you've seen how long it's taken Ethereum to switch to proof of stake. It's not trivial to evolve from the choice you've made in the beginning. So basically, while people found what he was doing very interesting, it wasn't realistic to launch it into an already established blockchain like Ethereum or Cardano, for example. So really, the feedback was like, great, you're going to need to launch your own chain. And so that's kind of what he did. So white papers were published in 2019. Then from 2019 till end of 2020, I mean, still today, to be honest, but basically it was just 3 devs working, actually 2 on the blockchain stuff, 2 devs working nonstop, building the testnet. And the testnet was launched in December 2020. So it was really at first a very technical process. Then really we obviously we had to secure a little bit of funding. We had to secure funding for the project. There are many different ways to secure funding for a project. In our case, we went for a pre-sale, and I arrived kind of in the middle of the pre-sale, so I could help kind of at the end. We were lucky that we had the pre-sale 2021, beginning of 2021. So that was a time where the space was positive. So it was relatively easy to secure the funding that we needed through the pre-sale. We still had there was a conscious decision by Cheng of limiting the amount of funds that we would collect, because there's what is really driving everything behind Alephium is to provide something useful. And we had seen a lot in the space that sometimes there are some things that are not useful that survive because there's such an influx of money into it that you can artificially maintain a semblance of usefulness that is not really there. And really, this is not something that anyone in the team would have been happy with. So there was also a conscious decision of being mindful of how much funds we would raise, so that we have enough to build what is necessary, but not so much that if we build something completely useless, we could maintain it forever, because forever is a bit exaggerated, but you get the point. So after kind of securing the funding, the Kickstart funding for Alephium, actually linked to this, and that is something that happened before, it was obviously important to figure out the tokenomics around the project. And obviously, the funds that we were able to secure through pre-sale were part of the design of the tokenomics of Alephium. Obviously, then it's kind of when the work of spreading the word really started, because up until then, Alephium was really going like submarine mode. Even though the GitHub was public, there hasn't been, if you look into our public social channel, you'll see from 2019 till around June 2021, which is around the time I joined, basically nothing. There hasn't been any external communication that much. So we kind of had to start building up our identity, I guess, because at the end of the day, a lot of people don't consider this marketing, because a lot of people in the space consider marketing whatever is going to have an impact on the price. But a key part of marketing is actually the identity that you build for your project through the interaction that you have with people. So, we had to decide a little bit the tone that we would have when we interact, like when we speak on behalf of Alephium. I mean, it's not that it was it's not like we spend days thinking about it, because at the end of the day, it very resemble our own voice, like the way we would approach it. And from that, we started building up on that. And if I start telling the whole story of Alephium, this will do the whole podcast. But that was kind of the foundation of, building something and starting to putting it out there. And I will end by saying that then the mainnet launch of Alephium happened in November 2021.
Perfect. Have you ever heard that old saying, it only took me, obviously it's more like 3 years and not 15, but the saying is something like 15 years. It only took me 15 years to achieve overnight success.
Yes. Yeah. I I this is definitely, we're still within those 15 years process, but I think we've already um I mean, we're already amazed with we consider it already a big success, but obviously there's still much more to do.
I'm really interested to get this sort of front row seat because uh, I have a strong feeling we're going to be hearing a lot more about Alephium in the future, and I wonder, hey, wouldn't it have been interesting to talk to Vitalik before anyone really knew who Vitalik was in the early days of Ethereum, and see what that process was like? Whereas if you were to look back at it now, you'd probably get a very different perspective because it's so long in the past with all the success that they've had. But I guess something I'm curious about as well is there's a lot of building and technical work that's happened, but the L1 space is pretty hotly contested, to say the least. What's your, and to the extent you're able to talk about it, what's your plan to win from an adoption point of view?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe a first thing to lay out as context. I think on our end, we don't feel like there's one L1 that will win everything. We do believe in the multi-chain future, and we actually think this is one of the value proposition that we bring, is that an actual alternative. Um, because right now the focus of Alephium is really to have a secure, scalable, and decentralized platform for smart contract and decentralized applications. So really the focus is around smart contract, dApps, token, those use cases, right? It's not meant to be a peer-to-peer payment system. I mean, it can be used at that, but that's not the main focus of it. It's really meant to be an infrastructure for application and services to be built on top. And right now in this space in crypto, you actually kind of have a monopoly when it comes to what you're building on in terms of infrastructure. The majority of the industry is built on the account model, and more specifically on EVM compatible chain, with a few exceptions, but within a large majority is building on account model. That is a big chunk. Slightly smaller but still huge chunk is EVM compatible chain, and it means that they all inherit the same technical trade-offs. So you basically have the same technical trade-off, and there hasn't been many alternatives that have really taken a big part of the adoption when it comes to smart contract and decentralized application. Obviously, you have on the technology family that we are part of, you have Cardano, for example. You have Ergo. You have many very interesting projects, but we still felt like, there was still room for something slightly different, a different way to approach that. And I think Alephium does. The first key way we're going to achieve that is by offering really something completely different, combining together benefits that no other chain really has been able to bring together at the same time. Obviously, we also have trade-offs, right? If someone tells you they solve every problem perfectly, better than everyone else, all of the problem without trade-off, this is not true. There's always trade-offs. We just think that out of those trade-offs, we really combine them into a unique combination. And for me, the biggest point is around the ease of writing secure smart contracts. Because right now, even for people who are expert in the field, it is really hard to write secure smart contract on EVM and EVM environments, because there are a number of attack vectors that it's really hard to protect yourself against. So you see projects spending sometimes millions to audit their code. You see projects stopping to put their code open source in fear of having exploited, of being exploited. So it was really, for us, I think this is where for me at least, it's where I see the biggest value proposition of Alephium, is a completely different environment, a new environment for the development of smart contract and dApps, where it's more secure. It's very easy to write secure code. It's harder to make mistake, and things have really been optimized for the comfort of the builders, which at the end of the day are the users of the Alephium, the main target of the Alephium blockchain.
In DeFi at the moment, there's such a phenomenal focus on security, and rightly so. But you see some of the level of hacks that happen, and even when people take levels of precautions that you might consider paranoid, these hacks still happen. And,
Yeah.
and from the user point of view as well, I know people that work in the industry and have worked in the industry for years that have had their life savings drained. You imagine when that reaches the mass user, it's a problem that's got to be solved.
Exactly. And it's not that I don't want to. It's not that we are advocating that's like, oh, we are 100% foolproof against things like that. But we do resolve a lot of the most exploited attack vector, like reentrancy attack alone. It drained over $1 billion of asset in a single year during the bear market. The asset permission, the pre-approval system that you have on EVM chain, and I think other chain as well, where you have to pre-approve assets for a smart contract to be able to interact with. This is basically used to drain wallets all the time, because in addition to being very inconvenient from a user experience perspective, it gives so many attack points in the user journey. And I fully agree with you, and I think this is a big thing. If we want DeFi, blockchain, and crypto as a whole to really reach another dimension of user base, we need to make drastic improvement on the security and safety at the end of the day.
I think to your earlier point, from a developer point of view, it's also important. And if you look at the state of the space now, in the OG smart contract devs, the people really focused on security and DeFi, they're some of the smartest people on the planet. But there's only a couple of hundred of these people in the world. When crypto scales up and becomes when you get crypto teams who need as many people as some of the traditional tech companies, that's not going to be feasible. It's got to be developer proof to an extent as well, because you can't rely on. Right now, we keep lean teams, and this is something I want to talk to you about as well, as you know. But when we have very lean teams of very exceptional people, that's okay. But that model only works when we're early. It doesn't work when you need to scale something up to a mass extent necessarily. So I think it being developer proof as well as user proof is going to be important in the long run.
Definitely. And obviously we have our own virtual machine, and actually even our own smart contract language. So some people really see this as like potentially problematic, exactly for the point that you just mentioned. But actually in practice, so far it hasn't been, for many, many different reasons, because even though Solidity might be very complicated to write secure code, it's huge. There's many ways to do the same thing, which can introduce so many pitfalls that people can fall into. So while we do have our own smart contract language, it is taking the best of existing languages. So it has a lot of Rust in it. It's a subset to some extent. So it's a smaller language, very focused. Obviously, over time, it might evolve and grow, but it's the approach of it starts small and it grows as it needs, versus allowing everything from the beginning, everything in every scenario always, because that's a lot harder to secure. So it's to be a lot more intentional about what goes into the VM and the smart contract language. And and then obviously when you build, there's, in addition to the smart contract language, you have a lot of other things that you interact with when you develop. And there, for example, one of the big things is called SDK. And here we use kind of one of the most adopted technology in this time of software development, which is TypeScript. We do think that just having a known language isn't enough to make it developer proof, as you said. It goes beyond that, and we think we have good arguments. And you also have a lot of other things around it, which maybe we can touch on later on, because otherwise I would be rambling again forever. But you have other way to accompany people and to put things in place to facilitate the adoption. But again, we've been very lucky that in practice, which we now have, because we had our first hackathon with new developers coming from many different ecosystems, and even very junior developers who were just like, you know what, I will try this out just to figure it out. Like we do have extremely positive feedback about the ease of getting up to speed and getting started. And already now we are seeing half of the question are no longer answered by us. It's other developers that started like a few months ago that are already kind of educating others, and it's very inspiring to see.
100%. That's really awesome. And I think this is a great segue to something else that I wanted to talk about, which is, so to set a bit of context here, I'm a I'm a huge fan of the concept of correct hiring being a force multiplier. I won't diverge too, because this could be a whole episode in itself to talk about this. But if you look, I started recruiting in around 2009, so it's kind of the tail end of what, if you've read The Sovereign Individual, what you'd think of as the industrial age, moving into what we have now, which is the information age. And something I talk about a lot is the industrial age model of company building is it's headcount, it's scale, it's industrial processes and adding people to it to so there's a kind of a relatively linear growth relationship there. And the way hiring was done then, can you believe companies used to boast about their headcount? Like that was their most important. We employ 1,000 people. Good for you. If you were to say that today, people might question if that's just inefficiency. But
it's kind of the same. It's similar to when companies or things boast about how many lines of code they have. This is the corporate equivalent of the technical. Look at how many lines of code I have. Where you can also say, well, maybe it's that much because it's not that efficient. So it's yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I think the other implication here is in a sort of industrial model. For the most part, maybe this might differ with executive positions, but in general, manpower is more important than creativity. So you add people to a process and you get more work. So for most hires, what is the difference between someone okay and someone amazing? Is it going to make or break the business? No. The difference might be 30, 40% maybe. So it was nice to have exceptional people, but it wasn't worth putting your all into. You'd rather just have more people that were good enough. But today, I'd say that model is completely inverted, and you regularly see very small teams of very exceptional people running circles around much larger teams of still competent ones, but that the difference between okay and exceptional now can be immeasurably large. We're talking thousands of percent, if not more. And so again, once you get to a certain scale and size, this model maybe has to break down a little bit, because if you need to hire 200 people, you're not going to hire top 10. It's just infeasible for almost everybody.
And in the crypto space, definitely, as you were just saying earlier, in some areas, you don't even have that many people worldwide, and that many exceptional people. Even today, there's not that many people who are able to contribute to the Bitcoin code base, like the actual protocol. So definitely.
Yeah, very true. But when we're talking early teams, which is who we normally work with, but then definitely you can use this concept. And from what I gather, Alephium has been pretty much I'm trying to think of the phrase here. I was going to say extreme proponent, but very lean. Yeah, you exemplify this concept.
Definitely, and I think at least for me, I'm a little bit biased as a person, because I've only worked kind of in. The first job was kind of a startup. We were 6. When I left, they were 50. So I kind of lived through the one approach of scaling up a tech business. It was a very, I would say, American approach of scaling, like American startup approach of scaling a startup business, a tech business. Then at my next business, it was kind of like crypto frenzy scaling, but I arrived, they had overscaled. And one of the first things I had to do was when I was there for a few months before I took on the HR responsibility within the company. But one of the first things I had to do was to reduce the headcount. And I think within 1 month of me taking up HR, I had to let go over 100 people. I had to let go 200 people. And so with Alephium, I think, like you said, I think definitely everything here resonates. We are a very small team, and we intend to remain a small team for multiple reasons, including efficiency. Also because we do want, at the end of the day, to be just one drop within an ocean of many other people contributing to the chain. So we don't want to make ourselves so big that we remain the center of the ecosystem. Obviously, in the beginning, we have to be, because it's really difficult to avoid that. But we want to kind of trick ourselves into making sure we empower others by also committing to not growing ourselves. But at the end of the day, it's also a personal preference, I think, for everyone involved in the team. We feel like we are way more efficient functioning like this. So to give context into the size, right now at Alephium, we are 13 people. And in full-time equivalent, this is 10. So not everyone is working full-time. We have some people who are working part-time, but this is 10 people full-time. And I think if anyone doesn't go look into Alephium, I think you'll be surprised to think that we are only 10 working, let's say, full-time. Obviously, now the community also has started, to be fair, this is really core contributor, but our community has really emboldened and taking over a lot of the activity that happens into our ecosystem. But for us, it was key. We definitely don't want to reach this critical turning point where you say that you pointed out where the model break. So we don't want to, we will probably need to add a little bit more people, but really a little bit, because at the end of the day, our days are only 24 hours and we might need a bit more bandwidth. But we want to be really mindful about bringing in people who will create the less inertia when they are being added into the team, because I think we all are in other, not fan of the term, but a lot of people say type A personality kind of things. So let's say we're all kind of really bulldozer in our own way. So it's important to find people that really match. But this is something I've also learned at my previous job, where I had to let go a lot of people, but I also hired a lot of people as well. And I found that, for me at least, and again, not everyone might agree, not everyone might have the same experience, but from my experience, I found that the right mindset at the end of the day is more important than skill alone. It's about really finding someone that fits into the team. Like you said, quality over quantity for me works way better. And I want to also bounce off a thing that you mentioned about innovation, that, you know, that it kind of hinders also innovation, because and I think this is something that is crucial for us, both internally, but also in Alephium generally, with the security aspect. If people are so worried about, it's a little parenthesis, but if developers are so worried about security, they don't have time to innovate anymore, because half of their time, if not more, is like looking at every hole and seeing if they can, like, you know, and then you don't have room for innovation or creativity. Anyway, importance for us of innovation and retaining agility in what we do, it's really key.
I think that's a really impactful point. And on a related topic, I'm curious on your thoughts on this, but something that I see is a lot of times people, they think, oh, we need bandwidth in this area. Let's just add people.
Oh,
but it doesn't necessarily work like that.
Well, if you have time, it depends about the velocity you want to have. If you're fine delaying things, because adding someone doesn't add bandwidth first, it removes bandwidth, because you have to bring the person up to speed. So it's really, again, this is why we are being very, very mindful about making addition to the team, is because it very rarely happens that when you add someone to the team, it directly translates into an extension of your bandwidth for the first month. And and how many months that is varies. This is actually going to reduce your bandwidth, because you have to make sure you have to bring this person up to speed. You have to let them find their space into your team. So yeah, I think it's a fallacy to think that adding people translate into more velocity. It's the opposite for definitely the short to medium term. And when you are a business, like a company, or I want to say business is the wrong word, because we don't have revenue or anything, but when you're a project operating like us, we can't afford to have a slow delay in bandwidth of 6 months. It's like we operate like 6 months is our long term. So like short term is 1-2 weeks, medium term is 2-3 months, the long term is 6 months. That's kind of our time frame at Alephium. And I think it is the same for a lot of people in the Web3 space. Time accelerates so fast. We're definitely not playing on the same time scale.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the last 3 months and how that would be like 3 years in another industry from back in the past.
Yeah. And maybe another thing, and I'm curious also about your opinion on this. One thing that I have seen, because in the HR space that I personally hate, is kind of an automation of this process, where I've had interviews where I had 4 rounds of interviews without talking to anyone. And for me, this is like really. So first it was kind of a, like the CV basic things. Then I had a first test, like a test, like a IQ test actually. And then I had like assignment that I had to do, and I had not spoken to anyone yet. And for me, I find, it's like very standardized recruitment process, and kind of, again, for me, it echoes to the thing is like, if you really have kind of those very standardized, a little bit dehumanizing at the end recruitment process, you end up finding people who fit exactly into your perfect box. But which again might be great, but I don't know. I personally, I like to keep, I feel like personality and human touch is so important in this. And I don't know. I find it a little sad that there's a lot of elimination of uniqueness of people, and you kind of go into those, like very standardized recruitment process. I find it very sad.
I'm really glad you brought that up. I swear these days, at least once a month, I'll get a message on LinkedIn or an email or something from someone who wants some feedback on some AI tool they're building or something like that. They claim, but we're going to revolutionize recruiting. I've been hearing this for 10 years. I mean, it wasn't AI back then, it was something else, but all these like tech startups who think they can change recruiting forever, and they fundamentally misunderstand recruiting. And they always think the bottleneck is, hey, well, if we could just make the screening process more efficient, we'd save everyone so much time. But it totally misses the point. And something I talk about often is, everyone's so focused on how do we make the best selection. They miss the first point, which you're only able to select from the people that are interested in the first place. So you're actually the most important aspect of the entire recruiting process is to have a really amazing way of getting the right people interested. And that's usually the complete opposite of how people approach hiring. I never advertise my jobs, which people find strange. But literally, you will not see a job advert on our website. You will not see me ever post a job on LinkedIn, because the people that not always, but most of the time, the people that we really want to talk to aren't going to look at those ads. They're not looking for a job. They're busy doing whatever it is that they do. And, people that are really dedicated, I'm not saying this is universally true. And sometimes you will hire someone great from a job ad. It does happen. But by and large, if you're really good at what you do, you're not thinking about, hey, what's in it for me? Am I happy? You're thinking, I need to get this done. And maybe you don't even notice that it's not so good for you.
And I did a little bit of HR and kind of operation advisory to a few startups. And I had one that was like also in the Web3 space, where the first step of their recruitment process was a 1-week assignment. And I was like, but anyone that is really good at his job is going to say, I don't know if we're allowed to swear here, but something that started with an F and end with U, if the first step is a 1-week thing. And you know what? They did not, when people did not succeed, they did not even respond. Like they just said, sorry, you've not been selected, when the applicants had already spent a week. So already by starting your process like this, you eliminate anyone that has a little self-esteem, because, you will keep the people who either they see this as a way of like, if they really want the job, we will keep only the passionate people. But at that stage, they don't know you. They've never spoken to you. Why would they be passionate about a job ad they found on LinkedIn? So at the end of the day, you'll end up with people who really, really need the job. And it doesn't mean you won't find someone great. It happens, but that would be luck. That would be luck. That won't be because you have greatly designed your onboarding process. And another thing that I personally advocate to, and I advocate this in every relationship that I have with any individual that I interact with professionally, but specifically also in HR, I think that you have to be job recruiting when you're the one looking for a job is soul crushing, so dehumanizing. And I find that as sometimes the people on the other end, I feel like we have a commitment to make this experience like a positive human experience, even if you end up giving a negative feedback. And so for me, it does take a lot of energy, but it's really key for me. And I think this is very relevant in Web3 when we evolve in a world where everything is online, people interact almost anonymously, to kind of bring this human touch and kind of kindness or compassion is not maybe not the word, but just acknowledgement from human to human that this is a crazy space and something like this. So I really always try to be kind and to be respectful of the people that choose to engage with us, whether it is people who want to contribute to our project, whether this is a member of the community, whether this is people who apply for a job. I find it so crucial to keep this really, kindness and respect when interacting with others.
Are you familiar with Frederick? I can't pronounce this. Frederick Bastiat.
No.
He was.
But, I mean,
so I think he kind of some of his concepts predate Austrian economics, and I believe he was the inventor of the broken window fallacy, where some of the economists would say, oh, if you just go around breaking everybody's windows, then everyone will have to get their windows repaired, so that will increase the GDP, which is of course nonsense. But that's how some sort of conventional economics is seen. But one of the other things he came up with is, there's the consequences of something which are seen. I think it was put as that which is seen and that which is unseen. So for everything that you do, there is a visible consequence, but there's also an invisible consequence, and people tend to ignore the invisible consequence. And I think that goes right to the heart of here. Years ago, I used to work at this big recruitment company, and they would send these mass mail shots. Like, I'm sure you get irrelevant cold emails all the time. This is before like email sequencing like today really existed. But they would find some tags on a database, and they would just blast out a job to 1,000 people with some tags, or they would blast out an anonymized resume to 1,000 people, and it worked for them. And I came in there, and I didn't do this. I did things on the phone, and they would say, yeah, but it works. I was like, yes, it works, but what you don't see is all the people on the background who resolved never to take our calls ever again because they're sick of getting spammed with this irrelevant nonsense. I literally had my biggest client. I could not email them from my work email address. I had to use my Gmail because we were blocked. And if you look at this on a hiring standpoint, people hire and they'll burn through so many things to get their hire, and they've left this trail of devastation in their wake that they don't see. But in the background, people talk, and that makes every time they go to hire in the future, it'll be harder. And it doesn't only impact hiring, because those people can be partners, customers. It's an ecosystem.
And then that can nicely also ties us back. Like this is also what I was saying. We're asking me what it takes to build something, and this is kind of also what I meant when I was talking about we had to decide the identity of the project, which at the end of the day, the identity of the project right now is a little bit of a combination of the identity of everyone that is the core contributor, but also everyone that is into our community. So the identity of Alephium is the sum of everyone that is part of Alephium. And as in the beginning, a lot of what was part of Alephium was basically just us, because we were starting. It was very important that I'm really proud of what we do. So, but I don't, by any means, I don't say we do everything perfectly, right? We do it the best way we can do it. I'm sure there's other people who disagree, but we really try. If you look at Alephium and you look at me, maybe you'll find a lot of me in Alephium. And if you meet other people from our community, you'll find this in the way we communicate with people as a project as well. And you'll find a little piece of everyone that is within the Alephium ecosystem into everything that Alephium does. And so I fully agree with you about the impact of the things the impact on unseen impact. And I think for me, again, in everything as I do, I always try to be kind and to be respectful of people's time and to be appreciative of everyone's time, even people who come with completely irrelevant thing. That happens. And I think finding still appreciative of people, they have taken time to give you the suggestion, which might be completely irrelevant, but at the end of the day, they are acknowledging that your project exists, they're interacting with it, and they have spent their time to give you a very not useful suggestion. But they still have done it. And so I think at the end of the day, this will define who you are, what kind of project you are, and what kind of the identity of your project, way more than hours of strategic thinking and qualitative marketing analysis of your user persona and how you should talk to them. I think at the end of the day, it makes, specifically in Web3, it makes such a big difference when you interact from human to human at the end of the day. at every stage.
It's like a really great insight that I heard one time, and I can't remember who I heard this from, but it always stuck with me. Is when people think of brand, they think, oh, logo, colors, the brand guidelines, but it's not that at all. The brand is simply the sum total of all the interactions that an organization has with the wider world.
Yeah, there's something about I remember in startup culture, and startup, it's such a big thing, but culture is not something you can write. You cannot write a culture book and just make this your company culture. The company culture will be how you are, will be the sum of the, like you said, the sum of the interaction. You can write it down. This won't be your company culture. This is not something you can just write down and say, oh, here are our value. If you have to say the value of your company are inclusion, just because you've written them on the list of value of your company doesn't make it your culture. It has to be something that is true at every interaction that you have internally and externally to your project and to your company.
Definitely. And you know what? I might be veering into dangerous territory here, but I find the more someone talks about a virtue that they have, the less of it they actually possess in reality, is generally how it goes.
Yeah, I should stop saying I try to be kind, but it's true. I say this. No, but when I do, I work a lot with the person, even though it's not my main focus, but I do work with the person that writes all of our content, the people who write all of our content and things like this. And often some of my feedback is like, oh, if you have to write it, it's not true. It's like, this is the kind of things that you shouldn't have to write. Like they are either through, but if you have to say we're nice, we do things, we're transparent, if you actually are, you don't necessarily have to say it over and over again. There's an easy way to show that you're transparent, is by actually being transparent in every aspect of what you do when as possible. Because I would say in Web3, people have sometimes a tendency of feeling like every information is something that is due to them. There's, being as transparent as possible is a thing. There are some things that can't be shared. That is just how it is.
Something I'm really curious about, and I know you won't have the exact numbers off the top. Well, if you do, I'm amazed. But just roughly, what would you say is the average tenure of someone at Alephium now?
It's easy because it's basically the same team since the beginning. So we've had only a few people who stayed not for too long. So I could actually, like, if you give me 2 seconds, I could count. Pretty much everyone that is still at Alephium has been there for, the last edition was, I think, in 2022, of the people that are still here. We had 2 developers that stayed less than a year, not at the same time, around a year. And 2 people more around community that maybe stayed like around a year. But everyone else has been there for now more than 2 years. With the two developers, so Cheng, the founder, is there, of course. Hopefully it doesn't go anywhere. That's kind of the point. But the first developer that he started working with is still there today. It's actually someone, funnily enough, completely random, unrelated, and completely irrelevant. But the 3 of us are born on the same day. So there was a time at the beginning of Alephium where we had 3 people. All 3 of us were born on the same day, not the same year, but all born on the same day. So every administrative document, I kind of, end of year declaration, I put like a little note to say it's not a typo. We are born all on the same day.
That's crazy.
So I would say, I don't have the actual number, but we don't have much movement in the team. Also because, again, we're not necessarily scaling. So it's not like we're looking for more hire, at least not in the core. We're obviously always recruiting developer for our ecosystem and for project. Like, we want to attract project and developers and also community members. And we have a lot of initiative outside of the core contributors to really engage and develop this. We have a grant program. Actually, we had our first community DAO being funded, that they are also empowered. They get a grant from us and they are empowered to support the growth of the ecosystem in the way they want it, so that, you know, we're not the only one with control over how things are funded, so that there's also room for people to support initiatives that we might not want to support, because we think it's also important that you know, people should be able to make Alephium also what they want it to be. And while today we're still very early and it makes sense that there's a bit of reliance on the core contributor today, we definitely want to take steps so that and we already have started and will continue to do so, so that the community can also really be empowered by us to take it anywhere they want. So there's actually a number of initiatives that are things we wouldn't have necessarily supported that turned out to be extremely beneficial to the ecosystem. So for us, we never had doubts about it, but it was really nice to see that we were not wrong about that. That, you know, even things we didn't think could be good ended up being really good for us. And we've been actually, again, I think it's a bit unfair, because I feel like as a project, as a team, we've been incredibly lucky all you know, throughout our cycle. It's actually one of my recurring nightmare. I feel like, dear God, we've been so, you know, we've been very, very lucky, very appreciative of the chance that we have. When are we going to stop being lucky, you know? But we really never had anything really negative happening, and anything that the community has pursued that we wouldn't have necessarily pursued, none of them have turned out bad at all. Some of them have turned out not necessarily successful, but actually not even that much. So
that's impressive. What I'm really curious about is, if you look back at the people that you have on the core team, what would you say that curve looks like in terms of, you know, in terms of the tenure and the contribution that they make? Do you see? I mean, there'll be a certain bedding in period when they first start, and then they'll ramp up. Do you find the longer they're with the team, the more benefit they bring? Has that been the pattern?
not really, because actually, while we actually just recently had a new member join the team to help me on the ecosystem development side and kind of business development. This is actually someone that was part of our ecosystem and that had been helping me behind the scene. Like sometimes he was making intros and things like this, and I kind of wanted to benefit from his support a little bit more permanently, or stability. So he's already from day one kind of made an impact, but to some extent he wasn't fully new to Alephium, because he had been part of the community. He had already, you know, made contribution. He brought one of the great dev team that is building into the Alephium project. It was his introduction that brought it there, and many other things that are coming. So I would say no, I don't see really any difference in impact of contribution from the people that were the right person. Mm-hmm. Like I feel like the one that, and I do want to say, the people that didn't stay the entire time, it's not that they weren't the right person completely, is that they might have been the right person for a certain stage of the company, and we might have been, company is more project, but and we might have been the right project for them for a certain period of time, and at some point we, you know, both evolved and we ended up not being the right fit anymore. But I feel like the entire time people were there, and the people that are here, the quality and the impact of what they did hasn't changed a lot, because I think by being very mindful of how we grow the team, and also we've managed to find people who we are very comfortable with one another. It's kind of because we don't necessarily, we all work remotely, so it's not like we see each other in the office or something like this, but we found like really a cruise speed, a comfort place. And honestly, I haven't seen any difference from day one till, you know, for me, it's going to be 3 years in 2 months. And I don't think, I mean, I had phases, like everyone, you have phases in your life, right? There's probably been times where I was less productive, but not necessarily because of my relationship to Alephium, more, you know, external things.
Mm-hmm. It makes a lot of sense. I think, and it sounds like you're here. My observation is when people go about hiring, the two extremes, it can go in two radically different directions. If everything goes great, like we were talking about earlier, people are force multipliers, and sometimes you don't even have to tell, hey, we need this thing done. They'll go and do the thing, but they'll also do something you didn't even expect that adds more value to the overall. And then that frees the founders and the leadership up to do more strategic things and raise their vision ahead, which is exactly how it should be. But when it's done wrong, it's almost that if you're not careful, every additional hire actually, like you mentioned earlier about that initial short-term sort of productivity slowdown, but it gets worse and worse because you have to babysit them all the time. You have to constantly wonder what they're doing.
Friction. Like if it's not a right fit in the team, in addition, it really slows down everyone because it creates friction in a lot of areas. And one thing that I do also think is important, this is why I hate standardized approach, because for me, it's really like a relationship, like a romantic relationship in a sense. It's like, there are some people that are amazing, they're just not great together. And it doesn't mean that one person is bad or like this, it's just they were not a fit. And I feel like with standardized things, you kind of lose this granularity of the same thing. The people that didn't stay, that stayed like a year at Alephium, everyone kind of, we really didn't have anyone that stayed less than a year. It wasn't, again, that they were not a fit for Alephium at that point in time. It's not that they were not amazing people, that they didn't do impactful contribution. It's just you have to also acknowledge the identity of your company and who you are and of your team when in this recruitment. Like it's not just that this is not the right person. You might also not be the right team for that person. And so it's really kind of matchmaking into finding really the right piece with who you are. And this is also ties into also respecting people you interact with, because if it doesn't work, you're 50% of the problem, in the reason why it doesn't work. And you have to acknowledge that. That we're definitely not the right team for many people in many situations as well.
I find that such a powerful thing is to be explicit about who and what you're not for, which also tends to have this way of more magnetically attracting the people who are right.
This is what I said by Leaky, where I got the opportunity to do things I never thought I could. I had zero HR experience. I had never recruited anyone in my life. And in every aspect of my life, I try to kind of be very honest and upfront, very explicit on it and upfront, because communication is kind of a little childhood trauma maybe, but it translated into kind of this need to make sure people that have communicated things clearly. So I've always been very transparent about the dynamics that are within the team, the company that I was recruiting for, because I want people to know it's not a favor to me and to the company to try and say, oh, it's perfect, everyone is so nice, everyone is so helpful, everything is pink, and you have candies at the end of every day. It's not helpful to me, because if I sell you a pink picture and then you come and it's actually all of different shade of grays, I've wasted my time, I wasted your time, and I've made sure that you took your decision to join the team not knowing the reality. So I fully agree with you on this. I always try to be very transparent also about the way I work, because it's not for everyone. I have, I try to improve always, but I'm also very realistic about the way I am when I interact with other people, and I try to be upfront about that. And I think this is fully aligned with you, that this is key, because you want people to be prepared as much as possible and know as much as possible about what the reality of being within your team and your company is before they make the decision to join. Like we where we have this a lot, and this one is kind of an easy one, is like interns. We have a lot of people who want to be interns with us, and we say no a lot of time because we don't have the bandwidth to be there for an intern the way they should. It's like, you can't come be an intern, you'll have to work alone. It's like, you can ask questions, but you won't have the level of support that you want. And more specifically, even though we do have an office and most of us are in Switzerland, we maybe go to the office twice a year to have a fondue and that's basically it. So, there's no point in me trying to tell someone that say, I like to see my colleagues and like this. Say, oh yeah, we go to the office twice a week, or we'll try to go to the office twice a week, when I know we go once or twice a year, basically, to the office.
There was this trend a while back, maybe I'm going to say 7 to 10 years ago or so, that really took off, of tech companies and actually recruitment companies as well. Hey, come and work for us. We have a dartboard in the office and there's an Xbox in the lunchroom. And hey, you get beers on Friday afternoon. And I think...
Or the best one, you get unlimited holidays.
Yeah, exactly. That you'll never actually take.
But we're going to make you feel, we're going to shame you if you take them.
Yeah. That's a classic case in point. And I think it's like, on one level, it's a valiant attempt at differentiation, but also I think it's quite a childish way of looking at things, because the whole point of a job, like my first boss, and this always stuck with me. I was having a really rough day one time, and he said to me, "And if it were easy, they wouldn't need us." And it's such a simple but profound statement. The whole point of a job is that there are problems that need to be solved. If there's no problems, there's no work. And so, my approach generally is, I will tell people all about the problems, and I'll be very explicit about, hey, these are all the things that suck. These are all the things that need fixing. And what you'll find is, when you do that, the people that are drawn to fix those problems will say, hey, I've never heard about a job like this before. I'm really interested in that. And the people that aren't up to the task will remove themselves from the process. So it's not only is it a more powerful way of attracting somebody by talking about actually what is bad, but it's more efficient too.
Yep. Yeah, because then you get to surprise them with everything that is good. So, they have, but really, they have accepted the job knowing, of course, you also talk about the good side of the job when you talk, but you can be a lot more explicit about the bad side, and the bad side or what, like you said, it's better this, it's kind of, it's like under promise, over deliver. Basically, this is another version of that.
Maude, it's been an absolute pleasure having you. There's so many little things I think we can take away from this. Any last comments or advice for people listening?
Whether it is for innovation, for efficiency, for creativity, and even for growth and speed, quality over quantity, the right person over many good, fit, the right fit versus many okay fit, we're going to make a world of difference, especially again in an industry in Web3. Again, we said it, we are not living on the same time scale as the rest of the world. So you definitely cannot afford the inertia of what larger corporation in traditional world can afford. So for me, I would this and maybe also try to sprinkle as much humanity as you can in every of your interaction, and treat others with respect and kindness, because at the end of the day, you could be on the other end of that. So, yeah.
Great advice. Maude, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure.
Same for me. Thank you so much for having me. I hope it would be as interesting for people who listen to us as it was for me participating into this conversation with you. But for me, I loved it. I really enjoyed the exchange. So thank you very much.
Same. You're welcome. And thank you also to everyone listening. This has been the Blockchain Startup Show, and we will see you soon.